Be on your way. So good morning. So I have the pleasure of calling this year's annual meeting to order. And what I'd like to start out with is I'd like Elizabeth, if you would start us out with an opening prayer. Thank you.
Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with us who take counsel for the renewal and mission of St. Luke's Church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right and just, and grant us both courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
So I'd like to ask Pat Brumbaugh, our Chancellor, to come forward and open us up. Pat's going to talk about the annual meeting from perspective of the bylaws and canons and kind of take us through some of the first steps and into the election. Pat?
Good morning. Our vestry is composed of 12 members, each serving a 3-year term, and the terms are staggered so that every year a third of the vestry is up for election, and that means this morning we have to elect 4 new vestry members. Our new vestry members are going to be filling the positions that are being vacated by Russell Curry, Scott Inman, Sue McAvoy, and Susanna Roberts, whose terms are expiring. Mark Simmons has been kind enough to round up some folks to help us count the votes. They are our tellers, and we thank them for the service. So, who can vote? You are a qualified voter entitled to vote for the vestry if you are at least 16 years old and a communicant in good standing. A communicant in good standing is a member of the parish who received Holy Communion in the parish at least 3 times during the preceding year and has been faithful in working, praying, and giving for the spreading of the kingdom of God. So if we're ready, we can go ahead and hand out the ballots, and if I just described you, please take one and be prepared to cast your vote. You must be present to vote. There is no voting by proxy, which means you can't vote for somebody else. You can only vote for yourself. The vestry nominating committee has nominated 4 parishioners to fill the open seats, and there have been no other nominations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call out the names of the nominees, and I'll just ask you to stand briefly when I call your name. Jimmy Cushman, Caroline Fouché, Melba Hughes, and Liv Johnson. Thank you, guys. There's more information about... Now that might be a little premature. There's more information about each nominee on the first page of the report. Under the bylaws, we must conduct the election by ballot. And since there are only 4 nominees for 4 spots, we're asking for an up or down vote on the slate. So vote for the 4 as a group, please. Please complete the ballot and then pass it into the row so that they can be collected and counted. Why don't you raise your hand if you don't have a ballot and you need one? Okay, there we go. See a few more in the middle there. Does anybody still need a ballot? If you need, okay, a few more in the middle. Thank you. I believe that my part is done. So while we're collecting the ballots, why don't we move on? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Next up, we have the report from the Finance Committee Chairman, and that is Cap Putt. I will let you guys know that this is the last time, unfortunately, that we're going to hear from Cap as Finance Committee Chairman. But the good news here is that he is unwilling to reprise his role as Donald Trump from 4 years ago. So with that, Cap.
Good morning. Thank you, Scott. For those who were here a couple of years ago, in an effort to sort of balance the books just a bit, I searched my house top to bottom for a Hillary Clinton mask. Obviously, I was unsuccessful, but it was cathartic nonetheless. For those not here a couple of years ago, my name is Cap Putt, and I'm the chair of the St. Luke's Finance Committee, at least for the next 4 minutes. As is customary at the annual meeting, the finance chair gives an update on the finances, a sort of State of the Union, if you will. While the president may not be able to give a State of the Union address, we at St. Luke's can do it. I'm pleased that myself, the senior ward, and the rector can give you the State of the Union for St. Luke's. In a vestry meeting earlier this week, I made the comment that being finance chair was a little bit like being a parent. What I mean is, like a parenting, when you focus on the short term, you feel like you're not accomplishing much. You're spinning your wheels. You can appreciate this, right? As a parent, you're focused on trying to get your child to eat vegetables, complete homework, practice the tuba, the free throw, or the bicycle kick. It can feel a bit like a battle, and the progress is hard to see day to day. But then years later, your teenager cooks the vegetables, understands trigonometry, and is on the club travel team. You have to measure success over a very long term to really see the progress. The church is no different. We struggle every year with the budget, getting pledge cards in, how to manage super tight cash in September and October. But over time, in our case, 150 years, we do great things. But day to day can be a real challenge. As an example, remember Snowmageddon? If you didn't get stranded in the traffic that afternoon, and especially if you were a kid, it was cool. It was really cold out and you could sled on the streets. How exciting. I was at home watching reruns of CSI Miami one of those days while the kids were out sledding. A neighbor knocked on my door, and when I answered, the conversation started like this. Harry is fine. I remember going sort of numb. Her lips were moving, but I couldn't really hear what she said. And I had that feeling that all was not fine. Then up the stairs came Harry, bleeding profusely from his chin after crashing into a brick wall on a sled. Off to Eggleston. Turns out that with a few stitches, some ice cream, and a large deductible, Harry would be fine. But I remember that feeling. One day earlier this year, I got a call from Richard Lee. Richard's a junior warden, but he also sits on the property committee. Richard says to me, "The church will be fine." There's that feeling again. This can't be good. What is Richard going to tell me? Did the bell tower just collapse? Richard says, the boiler's about to go, and we won't make it through the summer. Off to Eggleston for St. Luke's. A new boiler for a place like this costs $250,000. Now, I don't really know what a boiler does. Well, I guess I do. It boils water. but why you have to boil water to cool the church, I will never understand. That's why I'm on the Finance Committee, not the Property Committee. What I do know is that we don't have $250,000 just laying around. We ultimately figured it out, and it was actually a case study about how the Property Committee, the Endowment Trustees, the Finance Committee, and the Vestry can work together to solve a problem. We got our new boiler, but it's hard to budget for things like that, so we felt the pinch. Such is the life in church finance. In addition to the boiler, here's a summary of the year. In your material, you have the church balance sheet and a statement of financial activity, which I'll be referencing. Operationally, it was a tough year. We ended the year in the red by almost $200,000. We ended last year in the red by $80,000. And it was primarily because the contributions did not come in as planned. As you can see, expense control is pretty good around here, and we were right on what we budgeted. Truth is, we would have been well under our budget for expenses if not for some very out of the ordinary and unexpected expenses relating to the rector transition. But our primary issue was that contributions were short of what we expected by $200,000. So how did we get through? We borrowed $300,000 from the bank on our line of credit. You will see this $300,000 on our balance sheet you have in your material. Along with the $300,000 we borrowed, we have a small note still outstanding to SunTrust related to the Tending the Fold campaign for the church renovation due to some late changes in the scope of that project. We also have a $200,000 note payable to the endowment for, wait for it, the boiler. What you do not see on the balance sheet is the note for the purchase of the north lot adjacent to the church. Through some tremendous generosity by many people over several years, and I mean tremendous generosity, we received capital gifts that enabled us to fully retire the debt, and we paid it off in December. Such is the life of church finance. So we have tremendous resources that have helped sustain us for many years. We also have our day-to-day financial challenges, and they are becoming more acute. As I prepare to exit the finance role, and as I reflect on my years in this seat, I want to leave you with this. St. Luke's is a special place. We have accomplished many great things. However, we need a cultural change. We need to be more comfortable talking about and asking for money. We need to be more evangelical to get our story out. Simply put, we need more people, more pledges, and more growth. We cannot shrink our way to getting back in the black. We will have to grow. The good news is we have a great message, a great, generous, giving, and diverse congregation. Even in this time of transition, we need to get after it with radical hospitality. Lastly, I want to thank Mignon Crawford for her tireless work as the church treasurer. I want to welcome Jessie Wallace as the new church accountant. She has truly been a blessing. And I want to thank the members of the Finance Committee this year for their service. Bob Long, Brian Opsel, Debbie Bachman, Jeff Muscarella, our senior warden Scott Inman, and our treasurer Mignon Crawford, David Lowry, the church administrator, and Jesse Crawford, the church accountant. Thank you all. Thank you for allowing me to serve, and thank God for this special place. Thank you.
Thank you, Cap. So now I will deliver the warden's address, which is a little bit of a combination of what you've seen from the rector in the past as well as from the wardens. You know, what a year we've had. To the person who lured me onto vestry with the promise that not much happens on vestry, I give you 2018. On behalf of Richard Lee, our junior warden, and all the vestry, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about 2018 and our year of renewal ahead. Let's start by reviewing some highlights from 2018, some milestones that are born of the vision and hard work of the congregation, clergy, and staff. Let's start with outreach. The Boyce L. Ansley School opened this fall to serve children experiencing homelessness. There's no more heartwarming sight during the week than watching parents proudly bringing their children to the Ansley School each day. This is classic St. Luke's to create a private academy to help our neighbors. Also, under outreach, the St. Luke's Advocacy Council came together to discern and provide a Christian response to issues facing our community, agencies, and governments. This is our DNA. Let's turn to the parish. Our youth and children's programs have been a top priority this year. The Reverend Elizabeth Shouse Caffey has worked with Kristen Hauser, our Director of Children and Youth Ministries, to infuse new energy, strategy, and organization into these programs. Our last piece is getting the right youth leader in place and also getting us all more involved, volunteering to help support Kristen in this work. Our Invite, Welcome, Connect workshop brought 200 of us together to plan our growth this year. Look around. Evangelism and evangelism have a new swagger with creative ideas, programs, and efforts sprouting, and more to come. Evidence of our new faith and friendship dinners that emerge from Invite, Welcome, Connect and are offering a new avenue for fellowship and growth together in our faith. And how about pastoral care? A year and a half ago, we charged the Reverend Horace Griffin with creating a top-notch pastoral care program. We now have Community of Hope harnessing the loving gifts of trained parishioners to support those of us in need. And as Cap has mentioned, we got a new boiler. You're warm this morning, right? We want to thank the property committee and the facilities staff for our 2 high-efficiency boilers. Unfortunately, we did have to borrow some money from the bank, and we'll get an opportunity to pay that back over the next 10 years. Finally, this year, we of course said goodbye to our long-term rector, the Reverend Dan Matthews. We thank Dan and his family for all they've done for St. Luke's over the past 15 years. The pace of change has picked up to a fast clip towards the end of 2018, and it's not an accident. 2 years ago, our wardens challenged the vestry to take a more active role in our direction, and last year, our wardens reported on vestry actions around fiscal tightening and more robust leadership and a ministry review process. All was good and necessary. This year's vestry has also taken its responsibilities very seriously. We're stewards of an amazing place here at St. Luke's. Just as those before us have built this community in Christ to be a beacon to our parishioners, our neighbors, and our city, we are now responsible for the institution and its gifts, and we must take care of them and grow them. Luke 12:48 says it best. Everyone to whom much was given, much will be required, and for those to whom much is entrusted, much will be demanded. Which brings us to today. While the vestry has kick-started the process of change and renewal, it is up to all of us as a congregation to carry through the renewal and next chapter for St. Luke's. We extend the challenge given 2 years ago to the vestry to all of us here at St. Luke's. The Spirit is at work in our preaching, education, programs, and ministries. The Reverend Ed Bacon has been with us for all of 3 weeks as interim rector, but Ed's spirit, energy, and many gifts are helping to infuse our church with a new energy. His leadership is working to bring the immense talents of our clergy and staff together for all of us. Those who have been here have seen lots of new faces and lots of returning ones, asking questions like, what's going on at St. Luke's? How can I participate? And that's a wonderful feeling. Our charge as the vestry to all of us over the next year, be here in person or streaming, and bring others to share our amazing church. Let's talk about strategic renewal. You'll soon hear from Greg Vaughn, chair of the search committee, leading the effort to refresh the parish's 2012 strategic plan, now 7 years old, as part of the parish profile process. The parish profile creation will offer all of us many opportunities for discussion and input into where we want to be going over the coming years. The interim period between rectors is a God-given time for the St. Luke's family to reflect on the past, consider the present, and dream of the future to discern where God is calling us as a Christian community. This is the time to reflect, reconnect with what's great about us, and shed what's old and stale. It's a great time to realize that churches, society, and our culture have changed, and we need to connect in new ways with new services, new ministries, and a renewed sense of purpose. Whomever we call as our next rector is going to need to see that we can actually do that in order to be called here. Our charge to you: bring your ideas, your dreams, and your prayers. Leave your sacred cows at home, but participate. And finally, on the heels of Cap's notes about our finances, let's talk for a few minutes about stewardship and finances. God's gifts of joy, love, and faith that we receive through St. Luke's don't come free. You've seen this new insert that is new to the annual report format, and I think what it represents is a renewed commitment to transparency about St. Luke's finances. I actually have to call somebody out on this. I want to thank Don Killenberg for sitting behind me at last year's annual meeting asking why we have no numbers and trends to look at to see how we're doing. And this is part of the result. St. Luke's has a lot of resources. We get parking lot and building rental revenues that generate 13% of the dollars that we bring in. Our endowment provides 22% of the dollars we receive. Even more if you consider another $300,000 of grants we provide to parishioners in need, our on-campus ministries, and other organizations. We're in great shape for the long term. We sit on 7 acres of strategic real estate between Midtown and downtown. We've paid off our parking lot debt, thanks to those who've contributed generously to the first part of a capital campaign we'll hear more about in the coming year. Wow. A lot to be proud of. But comparatively, we have some growth to do in annual support. Bobby Mays, who we're happy to see back today on a pass from the Shepherd Center. Don't tell him. Has amassed stewardship information from churches in our city and nationally. And honestly, we don't compare well to others, either mainstream churches or otherwise. There are other churches in Atlanta of the size of St. Luke's with similar budgets without help from significant real estate income or endowments. Fewer than half our households pledge. Despite cost cutting, we don't often end up with a positive budget, as you saw when Cap discussed 2017 and 2018. And we've sometimes used funds from our unrestricted Rector Warden's and Vestry Fund, basically our rainy day fund, to try to balance the budget. We all need to understand our finances and our resources and be able to take actions to reverse these trends. What are those actions? We need to attract new members and inspire each of us to prayerfully consider increasing our pledges or even pledge in the first place. But to live into our legacy and the vibrancy that we want and the good works that we aspire to, we all need to do more. Our charge to you: give again, and remember that Christ loves a generous giver. And let's get more of our members engaged and invite others to join us here in this wonderful place. Richard and I want to thank you for the opportunity to lead a wonderful and hardworking vestry and to serve such a meaningful, God-filled place and incredible congregation. The coming year will be a tremendously important one for St. Luke's. Let's come together to prepare St. Luke's for this next chapter of its rich history. We ask for your active engagement, love, prayers, and patience over the coming year. More than anything, we ask you to be here. God bless. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, and now moving on to the future. I'd like to ask Greg Vaughn, who has graciously accepted the chairpersonship of our search committee, to come forward and introduce and talk a little bit about search. Thanks, Greg.
Good morning. When our vestry asked me to chair the search committee for our new rector, I was humbled, honored, and as Scott will attest, somewhat reticent. The search for our next rector is both an enormous undertaking and a wonderful opportunity. But I believe that God calls on us, often when it may not feel like the most convenient time, to use the gifts and talents that God has given us to serve. Many of us grew up hearing the adage, 2 heads are better than one. A more contemporary corollary of this is strength through diversity. We now have substantial empirical evidence that diverse teams outperform their non-diverse peers. And diverse teams deliver more creative solutions and better results. Our vestry has selected a gifted, talented, and diverse group of fellow parishioners to serve on the Rector Search Committee. The committee certainly represents demographic diversity of our community. It also represents diversity of life experience and professional experience, diversity of knowledge, tenure, and types of engagement with the church, diversity of prior experience with critical searches, both inside the church and out, all of which contributes to diversity of thought and perspective as we do the necessary work to select our next rector. I'm excited to introduce the search committee members. For those who are present with us in the sanctuary, I'll ask you to stand briefly. Lisa Boswell, Danielle Clark, Ann Kramer, Russell Curry, Fontaine Draper, LaFawn Gilliam, Melba Hughes, Kate Kennedy, who can't be with us today, Wade Morris, Larry Pless, who can't be with us today, Susanna Roberts, me, and as ex officio members, our retiring senior warden, Scott Inman, and our soon-to-be-announced new senior warden. Thank you. Two weeks ago, the search committee had our official kickoff in a joint meeting with the vestry, our interim rector, the canon to the ordinary, and our consultant. The vestry has charged the search committee with a clear objective: to deliver a non-ranked slate of finalist candidates, all of whom are highly qualified to serve as our next rector. The vestry will then meet with each of the finalists and decide whom to call as the next rector for St. Luke's. Please note that there is no overlap between the search committee and the new vestry. So as we move through the recruitment and selection process, more than 24 independent heads, not just 2, will contribute to the selection of our next rector. We embrace, value, and sometimes flaunt just how special we think St. Luke's is. We are part of a special and amazingly diverse community of service, faith, and love. And the rest of the world, at least the rest of our Episcopal Church world, sees this too. St. Luke's is a marquee parish, not only in the Diocese of Atlanta, but across the nation. All eyes are on us. We are in a wonderful position to search for our next leader. One of my favorite St. Luke's moments occurred just 2 months ago when Bishop Rob was with us. We are familiar with the verse, Matthew 9:21, which describes a suffering woman who was present in a crowd with Jesus. She said to herself, "If I could only touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed." Well, at the reception following the 9 a.m. service, I was standing near the back of the parish hall chatting with the bishop. A fellow parishioner came up behind him, reached down, grasped, and lifted the bottom of his cassock. Bishop Rob immediately turned to her, smiled, and said, "I'm not that guy." As a search committee, we are not looking for that guy or gal. She or he will probably not walk on water, but we will seek out the very best next rector for St. Luke's. That we is a collective and inclusive we, the search committee, the vestry, and you, parishioners. And we will take the time needed through listening, research, intentional outreach, discussion, discernment, and prayer to identify a slate of candidates that we, as a community, will be excited to welcome as our new rector. There is no rush. This work and this decision are too important. We are truly blessed to have Ed as our interim rector, to be our pastor, administrative leader, spiritual leader, and wise counselor, to allow us to take the time and space that we need. I've described the search process as a journey, and we are embarking on this journey together. When a group begins a journey together, an expedition, a hike into unknown territory, it is intentional, and the group typically has a defined destination in mind. For us, the search committee serves as the vanguard of the group, leading at the front, at least initially. But as we move forward on our journey, we as committee members will periodically fall back, often into the middle of the group, sometimes walking on the perimeter, and occasionally bringing up the rear, but always listening. The first group task on our journey together is the Parish survey. We will launch the survey in the coming weeks. We will use all forms of available communication to announce this and encourage everyone to provide candid feedback and input through the survey. We'll also host a series of small, intimate conversations and larger group meetings with parishioners. We ask you to attend one or more, to share your thoughts and perspectives, and to listen to the thoughts and perspectives of others. The results of the parish survey, quantitative and qualitative, as well as the parish forums, will inform our parish profile. The profile is incredibly important. It will serve as a marketing tool of sorts to introduce St. Luke's to prospective candidates and potential sources. We want to present ourselves in a positive light, of course. However, we must and we will present the authentic St. Luke's, what and where we have been, who and what we are, and what we aspire to be. The parish profile will also inform the job description, for lack of a better term, for our next rector. I expect there will be some combination of spiritual leader, senior executive, great preacher, learned theologian, pastor, teacher, counselor, mentor, people leader, partner, community spokesperson and liaison, and new friend. Your input to the parish profile will help us to determine the right combination of these and other attributes we will seek in our next rector. After the parish profile is completed, the search committee will begin accepting nominations, but not before, as we won't know exactly what we're looking for. We will create an email address to which nominations can be sent, or you can pull me aside or one of my fellow committee members, as I know St. Lucas will do, to share your specific names. So, chief communicator is and will be one of my principal responsibilities as chair. This leads me to a critical point. The search committee and the vestry are fully committed to a transparent process. We are on this journey together. This is not a secret cabal. However, it is essential that we conduct a confidential process. This is necessary to protect and respect both our candidates and St. Luke's. I commit to you that I will regularly and openly communicate updates on our progress. As we move forward, I humbly suggest that you think of me as a guide of sorts. When embarking on an important journey together, a group often enlists the services of a guide. The guide typically has traveled to the destination before, but usually not with the exact same group. The guide does not know everything, but from experience, she knows some of the pitfalls to avoid. The guide can't anticipate everything that the group will encounter along the way, but with some knowledge and prior experience, he can help the group decide when to stay the course, when to adjust course, and when to pause and take a breather. The guide may have a map, but the group will undoubtedly encounter some unexpected bad weather or twists and turns along the way that don't appear on the map. There are times when you'll like the guide. There will be times when you may question the guide. And there may even be times when you get a little frustrated with the guide. But the best guides always have a plan, an adaptable plan, but a plan to ensure that the entire group arrives safely at the destination together. My commitment to you is to be the best guide that I can be for us on this journey. On behalf of your search committee, we ask for your candor, patience, support, and most importantly, your prayers. With God's guidance and grace, we begin.
With that search committee and leadership, can we not feel anything but great about the next year and a half and the next years to come? Thank you, Greg. That was wonderful. All right, now I would like to ask our interim rector, the shy and retiring Reverend Ed Bacon, to please come forward.
Thank you. I'm as ebullient right now as one of those giant helium-filled balloons in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. I've been feeling that all morning, and then when Bobby Mays came and surprised me for communion, I lost it and started crying and barely could give him the bread. I'm so grateful and humbled to be here. A gifted public speaker recently told me, you got the people if you tell some stories. So I'm going to tell 7 quick stories. I'm delighted that the wardens asked me to file a report during this annual meeting. While in great part today's meeting is about reporting on St. Luke's calendar year 2018, with that stunning exception from Greg just now, looking forward. It's simply not the DNA of St. Luke's to focus on the past. That's the first story, discovery, really rediscovery I want to share. For the past 35 plus years, I have known St. Luke's to be about looking forward with faith in this wonderful God who created us, the living and loving God who was embodied in Jesus Christ. And I know that St. Luke's characteristically does its faith-oriented looking forward, point number 1. The second discovery narrative is that St. Luke's forward-looking faith is faith with a heart for the city of Atlanta. Once upon a time in 1983, when St. Luke's launched me into a 3-decade career of being rector of 3 churches in Dalton, Georgia, Jackson, Mississippi, and Pasadena, California, my then boss, Dan Matthews Sr., gave me a beautiful pen and ink print of St. Luke's. Many of you have seen it. That print, which hangs in hopes in my home in Birmingham, is of St. Luke's front porch looking out over the skyline of 1983 Atlanta. And I'm happy that another copy of that same print now hangs in my office here in 2019. I believe that St. Luke's has become even more fruitful and tenacious and creative in incorporating into its vision the needs, challenges, and glory of 2019 Atlanta. Needs, challenges, and glory of Atlanta. That print says it all to me. The doors, as well as the embrace of these gorgeous church buildings, and by the way, they are immensely more beautiful than they were in 1983, are open wide in faith, hope, and love to the delights and challenges of the city. I love the fact that there are 13 4-year-old children in Ansley School every day here at St. Luke's, sharing the classrooms of our Christian formation or Sunday school program. The requirement for enrollment in this free of charge private school for these 4-year-olds is that they have somehow been touched by homelessness. Now, I know that everybody in this room knows this, but I am always, as long as we're streaming, live streaming, in which we are right now, I'm always speaking to the people who are here and the people who are streaming live from Atlanta, but also from other states, and I know they're tuned in this morning. Some of these kids have lived in cars and on the street with their parents, and I was fortunate enough to go on a tour last week and hug these kids and see the operations of the Ansley School and be in a meeting that decided to recommend to the vestry that St. Luke's expand their spaces here for 2 more classes of 4-year-olds next year and the next. That's stunning. These children's parents receive support not only from the staff of Ansley School, but they receive support and training along with hundreds of other members of the human family who are generally underserved except for the extensive services of Crossroads. Then there are the impressively evolving psychotherapy services and training from TAC, and then the staff of the Church of the Common Ground provides support for the spiritual, social, emotional, and physical needs of people without a place to live, and they are officed here. And there are many other examples I could give, but suffice it to say right now this morning that I have rediscovered how central to St. Luke's DNA is commitment to those who are marginalized in Atlanta and in the world, and I am aware how far worshipers often drive each Sunday to come downtown to church when so many churches downtown are being vacated in the Episcopal Church. And when I ask people, what brings you to St. Luke's? The answer almost always includes the words, our outreach. Number 3. Now, God's Spirit is still revealing to me why in the world she brought you and me together here for this sacred, holy interim period between your last rector, the very gifted Dan Matthews Jr., and your next rector, God has yet to reveal. Why did Kathy Lee say to her husband, Richard, why don't we look at Ed Bacon? Kathy was fully aware that I am in my elder years and was very happy in my retirement in Birmingham near our grandchildren. She knows that. But I love Galatians chapter 5, 22, 23, which tells you and me how we can tell if the Holy Spirit is around and at work. St. Paul writes there that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. I don't care if a person's Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, or atheist. If they are loving, joyful, peaceful, patient, kind, generous, trusting their life in the hands of love as the ultimate power, if they are gentle and working on their own egocentricity and the things that trigger them, then it is my testimony to you this morning that the Holy Spirit is working on them. And my friends, I feel the Holy Spirit working on me and on you and in our being together in these next year and few months. 4. A fourth discovery or story is a profoundly revelatory meal I shared with the vestry before I officially started work. This was back in December. I wrote about it in my printed report in your booklets, and you can read that tonight when you're trying to go to sleep on page 2. During that informal dinner conversation with vestry members, I heard the following 3 things. Ed, we want to be inspired and energized. We want to heal and move into wholeness. And we want to change and be transformed. I took those 3 desires as my internal agenda. My written contract speaks of making sure that the ministries of St. Luke's continue to be vitalized, and I'm going to do everything I can in my power to do that. And I've discovered through that vestry meal and in my less than 30-day tenure as your interim rector that inspiration, wholeness, and transformation is what it's all about. It seems as if the sound of the genuine, to borrow Dr. Howard Thurman's phrase, is whispering in my heart in every encounter, Ed, remember that you are needed to energize, heal, and facilitate healthy change. Number 5. The 5th and the 6th discoveries and stories. The 5th is a rediscovery. And that is how crucial feeling safe is for faith and growth, for a heart for outreach, and the ability to be energized, healed, and transformed. I have a close soul friend named Dr. Dan Siegel. He's a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist at UCLA, author of many books, my favorite of which is Mind Sight. And he says that we all can develop a secure base of love from which we can confidently launch out for many fruitful adventures as long as there are 4 S's dynamically active in our lives. Now, before I go there, I just want to quote from Michel Legrand, who died yesterday, and he was quoted on, he was saying on BBC last night, "You must take every risk. You must abandon any thought of success. You simply need a crazy love for people and a crazy love for what you do." Now, the 4 S's will help us risk it all and have a crazy love for people and a crazy love for what we do. Those 4 S's are: if we are seen, soothed, and safe, we can be secure. I think those 4 S's characterize Jesus' life and ministry. I think Jesus was feeling all 4 S's in his being as a result of his being one with his loving God. I think others were feeling those 4 S's as in his presence they were becoming aware of having been made one with all that is holy, including one another in all creation. So I want you and me, in this year and a half, roughly. I want us to have these 4 S's in mind in all of our encounters. Are we seeing one another? Are we soothing one another? Are we doing everything we can to make one another feel safe? And if so, we'll be secure. And this safety relates to many different things in our lives, both physical safety, to be sure, but also relational safety, feeling safe to be candid about what we really think and feel without fear of being excluded or ostracized. I've heard many times how valued a quote-unquote big tent feeling is here at St. Luke's. We have worshipers and members representing many differences in opinion and background and racial and ethnic identities. Men and women, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and non-binary people. I hope that the brand of St. Luke's around the city and the world is the following. Those people at St. Luke's really have figured out how to keep in the big tent the widest variety of difference. Desmond Tutu calls this big tentness, which is the Anglican word for it is comprehensiveness. He calls it the Anglican messiness. Number 6. I'm delighted to discover how much interest there is in this church, in being a part of the new narrative that is developing across the world about religion and Christianity. People have been so responsive to my 3 Sundays of teaching. Richard Rohr says, the longer I have tried to follow Jesus, the more I can really say that I no longer believe in Jesus. I know Jesus. Then he goes on to say, in the years ahead, I see Christianity moving from mere belief systems to an invitation to practices whereby then we realize things on a new level. Jesuits call them exercises, Methodists call them methods, Gandhi called them experiments with truth, and I don't know if y'all have heard, but I've written a book, and I call them habits. Habits of love that we practice. Rohr says, let me sum it up in this way. We do not think ourselves into a new way of living. We live ourselves into new ways of thinking. And my teacher, Elia Delio, whom you're going to hear more and more, says that it's as if Christianity has become too puny for the grace and grandeur of God. We need a new narrative that's not scared of science, not a closed system, not scared of any human being, but an open system. And we're in the process of creating that new narrative together. Now I'll close. After I say, I've never known a team like the team of Scott Inman, Richard Lee, and Mignon Crawford, who reached 2.5 hours away from here into Birmingham and dislodged me from my retired happiness. They're truly the 3 magi in my life, and I'm so grateful that they have been in leadership roles. Now my story, my closing story. In Israel, Palestine, there's one of my favorite geographical phenomena. 3 bodies of water. At the very headwaters of the Jordan River, you can go and put your feet in the cool springs and be refreshed. And then they come on down south and they form the Jordan River in which Jesus was baptized. And the Jordan River then flows into the Sea of Galilee, and the Sea of Galilee is full of life. There are people out there who are skiing and rowboating and sailing, people in motorboats, people in tourist boats that stop in the middle of the Sea in Galilee so you can be quiet. There are people out there in their fishing boats that have been in their families for multi-generations. The Sea of Galilee is full of life. It's so vibrant and vital. And in the lower banks of the Sea of Galilee, the River Jordan has flowed into it, and then it flows out at the southern banks. And then for 60 or 90 miles, I've forgotten which one, it flows down into the third body of water that has me intrigued, and that's called the Dead Sea. And the Dead Sea is just that. Ain't nothing much going on. I mean, you can go out there and pay some money and float because it's so full of salt, and then they sell some mud from it, and you can put it on your skin, and they say it's going to make you as handsome as I am. You know, things like that. But the Dead Sea is dead. And the reason the Dead Sea is dead is because the River Jordan flows into it, but nothing flows out of it. Now, if we were going to be on retreat right now, after I'd hand you some sandwiches, because I know Elizabeth is dying to get some food, I'd ask you to take your journals and pen and put 2 columns. Sea of Galilee people and Dead Sea people. Sea of Galilee people are people into whom God's graces flow, and by God, they open their lives and let those graces flow in as well as flow out. And they are as vibrant and vital as is the Sea of Galilee. And then there are people who are Dead Sea people. Oh, lots of grace from God is flowing into their lives. But they hold on to it, hoard it, never share, never fill out a pledge card. Can you feel where I'm going? Or when they do fill out a pledge card, it's like they're tipping God instead of being generous with life. St. Luke's Church is a Sea of Galilee church. It is not a Dead Sea church, but St. Luke's Church all Sea of Galilee churches can turn into Dead Sea churches if they don't have people who are Sea of Galilee people sharing God's grace with the world. My brothers and sisters, my wife and I have pledged to St. Luke's Church. I want to make sure all of you are pledging, including those people who are listening to me streaming in. We'll be glad to take pledges from Des Moines, Minneapolis, St. Pete, anywhere. If you do that, and like Greg said, we come together as a diverse team, we'll tear this thing up. Thank you very much.
You don't want to miss any of this for the next couple of years. All right, with that, I am told that we now have an election. If you would, once again, Jimmy, Melba, Caroline, Liv, you guys stand up once again, and let's welcome them as part of our new vestry. All right, let me ask Richard Lee to come forward, if you would, please, Richard. And we also have some folks that we want to recognize for the service that they provided over the years. Where's Robert Long? Where is he? Robert Long, come forward, come on. Robert has served for, I think, 8 years as chancellor. Is that close enough, Robert? And has just retired and turned over duties to Pat this year. So we want to thank Robert for everything he has done for St. Luke's. Thank you. And Cap Putt, who has resigned his lifelong finance chairpersonship. All right, and let me ask Sue McAvoy, Russell Curry, and Susanna Roberts to also come forward. These folks... I have been honored to serve on the vestry for the past 3 years with all of these folks, and I can't tell you what a wonderful opportunity and blessing that has been. Thank you.
And last but not least, the longer I live, the more I'm convinced that God, in His infinite wisdom, always provides us with what God knows that we need at different times of our lives. And that's exactly what God has provided this wonderful parish for this past year in the form of Scott Inman as our senior warden. Hold on, we're not done yet. I don't think I've ever met anyone who has worked as hard and as diligently on behalf of our parish. Scott's intellect, his creativity, his wisdom, his compassion, and his spirituality have served as an inspiration for the vestry, for many of you in the parish, and certainly for me personally. Lest his head get too big, however, I do need to mention to you one concern that I've had all year. Scott's email address is sinman@such and such, which can also be read as Sin Man, which seems a little unseemly for the senior warden of St. Luke's Church. Scott, from the bottom of our heart, we thank you for all you've done and all you are.
Okay, I have one more set of thank yous. Where's Elizabeth? She went to eat. She got hungry. Well, we're going to thank her. She's not here, but I do need Horace. Horace, if you would, the meeting is adjourned, and I'm going to ask Horace to please dismiss us, if you would. Thank you all.